Hello everyone, welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm Brian Slagel, your host, the CEO of Metal Blade Records, and more importantly, one of the world's biggest Iron Maiden fans. And finally, on this podcast, and this won't be the only time, we finally get to talk about Iron Maiden. And it's cool that we're going back to the early Paul Di'Anno period to start off with it. Murders in the Rue Morgue is the track. What an amazing song that is. If you guys are looking for really cool merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, the whole thing, from music, sports, entertainment, really almost anything, you guys have to go check out our friends at Old Glory. Go to oldglory.com and enter the code METAL1982. Again, that's METAL1982, and they're going to give you 15% off of your order. So go check them out. They have great stuff, lots of metal gear. Go to oldglory.com. Check out our friends at herocarepackages.com. Show your support with Hero Care Packages, premium military care packages curated to uplift our service members. If you want to help out and give our service members something fun, you can go to the site, herocarepackages.com. You can create your own package, customizable, to send to our service members, and they will greatly appreciate it. We know that. We appreciate what they do, and they need stuff. So again, go to herocarepackages.com, enter the code METAL1982, and you'll get 10% off your order, and you can customize it, upload it, and send some really cool stuff to our amazing service members. And again, herocarepackages.com. Super excited to talk about this track. We're going to talk to the great Sirius XM DJ host, Mr. Keith Roth, and as always, Mr. Mark Lewis about the production. But first, we go up to Canada and hear Martin Popoff.
All right, nice choice, Brian. Iron Maiden Murders in the Rue Morgue. February 2nd, 1981 for the second Iron Maiden album, Killers. This is the first one produced by Martin Birch. The debut was by Will Malone, and they were never kind of happy with the production, but this one's got, good quality, not crazy over-the-top quality. It doesn't sound crazy expensive, this album, but it's got a good, visceral, exciting production values, enough bottom end, enough brightness at the top. But Murders in the Rue Morgue, based on the Edgar Allan Poe work of the same name. This is Maiden. They do this. They did it already on the first album. They're doing it a lot moving forward. Basing things on TV shows or movies or books or even wars. Yeah, this is a nice, big, flashy title on this song. This album is the first album for Adrian Smith. He's replacing Dennis Stratton. I've always loved this song as my favorite song on this album. I mean, there are a lot of cool ideas on Killers, but what I like about this song is its melody and its punkiness. It really has a knees up, as they say in the UK, sort of rambunctious energy about it, and kind of chord sequences as we get through the verses on this. I also like the fact that it is up-tempo and fast, but it also has almost like a crude version of what you might call later as a breakdown, the way it goes to halftime for the chorus. So that halftime chorus kind of adds weight to the thing, and as Iron Maiden is already proving as a pattern, there are interesting nooks and crannies and little musical passages and changes throughout the song, like a really, well thought out break section in it. But yeah, this is an album everybody loves. It's the second and last album for Paul Di'Anno, and I think this is the song that has the most charm on Killers.
Interesting stuff as always. Martin's kind of breaking down the song. I like that. I don't know that he's done that quite yet on this podcast. So that was pretty cool. I don't know, charm. That's an interesting angle. I don't know if I would agree with that. I do agree that it's the best song on the record, I think. But that was kind of fun. And, Martin, like I said, Martin knows his stuff. He's written over 150 books on hard rock and heavy metal, including several on Iron Maiden. He's got a new book coming out, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything about it yet, but I'll have to ask him next, and we can talk about it hopefully on here. But great song, great breakdown from Martin. I was impressed, like a whole breakdown of the song. I like it.
Welcome back, everybody. We're doing things a bit differently this episode. As you will see, we're doing part of the episode from the Rock N Pod convention, and now we're in Mark Lewis's studio, and we're going to talk to Mark Lewis about the incredible song by Iron Maiden, Murders in the Rue Morgue. How are you, Mark? And thanks for hosting us here.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming to my place of work and joining us in Nashville. And yeah, I'm here, ready to talk.
It's very nice. I'm not a really big wood guy, but I love the aesthetics of the wood you have in here. It's very nice.
It designed itself, but I knew that it had to be this look being in Nashville, but also, the aesthetic of the designer, Roger Darcy. He's amazing. And it's funny, some of the wood that looked so cool ended up being the cheaper option, which was the greatest thing about it. But yeah, I'm glad you dig it, man. I love this room.
So Murders. This is the first record that the great, and in my opinion, the greatest producer and mixer of all time, Martin Birch, did for Iron Maiden. It's their second record, obviously, which Martin Popoff, of course, has already talked about. When you first heard the record, what did you think, production-wise?
Oh, I remember hearing that record actually after I had heard Number of the Beast, since I was just born when Killers came out. And I just thought that, to me, we've talked about other records aging well. Killers has aged incredibly well for me. And I remember hearing and thinking that record just sounded meaner. Like, especially if you go back, like Number of the Beast sounds brilliant. I mean, all of the Martin records sound brilliant. But that record in particular, it was just, the band was on fire. Even like you can really notice it in the drums and Steve Harris's bass. There's just more crunch. There's more distortion. Like Martin was just pushing things more. Jay Rustin and I talk about that record, have talked about it more than once, that it's our favorite Maiden record as now, as adults. And it's just got that, I mean, would punk be the right word?
I was just going to mention that it had that kind of that punk energy in it because they were starting out, they're young. Clive Burr is amazing. The drums on this record are just phenomenal. And even though Steve Harris will never, I don't think he's ever admitted to being punk be an influence for him, this record to me was so punky, especially with Di'Anno's vocals, the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, it could be sacrilege to say, that, I mean, I'm certainly not Team Di'Anno versus Team Dickinson, but there's just something so special about that when he was on those records. I mean, when Bruce joined, it brought more of a theatrical element to the band. And, that's not always where my taste aesthetic, goes. And Killers, man, it's just like, oh God, it's so intense and it's more raw and it's just a bit darker overall as a record. I mean, of course, you're not going to be as dark as Number of the Beast in terms of lyrical content and things like that, or the aesthetic of some of the songs on Number of the Beast. But just the feeling of the band and that production was so, it's just special to me. Like it's my favorite.
Number of the Beast is still my all-time favorite record ever. Never will be displaced. Killers, a lot of times, it's my number 3 record with Rainbow Rising in the middle of there. The funny thing, though, about this record, so I was young enough to be into these records when they came out, but the first Iron Maiden record and then this one. And I love Killers. At the time this came out, this is my favorite record. I love the energy of it. I love the songwriting. I love the lyrics. I love the way Di'Anno sounded. And again, Martin Birch is so brilliant. He really, I think that brought the level of their playing up as well because he's such a good producer and captured everything perfectly on this record. So then Di'Anno leaves and Dickinson comes in for Number of the Beast. When that record came out, I was still working at the record store. And I would say it was split down the middle of people that liked Bruce and people that liked Di'Anno better. And over the years, it's obviously been a much different perspective. But when that record came out, there are a lot of Maiden fans who were like, I don't really like Bruce in this band.
Yeah, I could easily see that. I mean, obviously, Bruce has gone on to more than prove himself in history, not just with Iron Maiden, but great solo records and all that stuff. But I could easily see it. And, you think about how divided people are now, when a band member changes and all those things like that. It's like, of course, that would be the case. And yeah, man, I mean, it's that record. I mean, it's, I encourage people to go listen to that record and especially, in a good set of headphones, and you just realize how crunchy it is, and which is not always Martin's signature thing to really push things like that. I feel like that record just has a thing. I would love to know more about the recording of it, and I wish I could have ever gotten to talk to Martin Birch,
Oh, me too. That was like one of my bucket lists of, I always wanted to just even 15 minutes with him at some point, but he became, by the time it was to the point where I probably could get that to happen, he was pretty reclusive, and I think his health was eventually going. I got kind of close. I knew people that knew him, and it was semi-possible that I could make that happen, but it sadly just never did, which, yeah, again, he's produced probably, if I look at my top 20 records, half of them are all produced by Martin Birch. He had such an impact on me, even the first Machine Head, Deep Purple was the first heavy thing I ever heard that really changed my life. And he just such a great producer, and there's not a lot, like he never wrote a book or anything, and there's not a lot of stuff where you can go in and read specifically about the production on those records. There's a few snippets here and there for like Blue Oyster Cult and some Maiden stuff too. Deano has talked about it, and even Steve Harris has talked about it, but there's not a lot there. So, but that's kind of interesting. It's the mystery a little bit too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was so consistent, but also, somewhat of a chameleon too with his bands, which is something that I just always admire about producers. All my favorite guys were like that. Yeah, man. I mean, and you're absolutely right. So many critical records. I mean, Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules and just, man, and the Rainbow stuff, and then
Blue Oyster Cult.
Blue Oyster Cult, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Fire of Unknown Origin is a classic.
Yeah. I mean, and I've always admired. It's so funny. Like every time I put on one of his records, I'm like, man, the way he captured drums was so head and shoulders above a lot of guys back then, especially. And he never succumbed to trends. Some guys will do it to an almost embarrassing level, and it there's guys that started trends in the 80s with the drum reverbs and things like that. And there was only a handful of guys that really did it well. We talked about it with Tom Alom on Priest, and he did it well. But there's other times where you hear records and you're like, man, obviously this band, was listening to some 80s pop or something and wanted to put it into metal, or they succumb to this big kind of mechanical drum sound back then. And it just sounds so cheap. And there's guys that pulled it off well, and Martin it was never a fad thing for him. It was just the band sounded like the bands, and I've always been so curious about how he works, because it was his clarity, his power. He was a guy.
Yeah, and this song in particular, I think it had to be pretty difficult because it's got that very punky sort of influence on it. It's very fast. Yeah. It's really heavy. There's a lot of stuff going on in this mix. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff with Deano's vocals in it that were really interesting, but it just sounds so good. Yeah. And especially the drums. Like, I'm a huge Clive Burr fan, one of my favorite drummers of all time. And this song in particular, he's just doing stuff, and I've talked to other drummers about it too, and they're like, yeah, he's doing stuff that really not very many people had done at that point. Yeah. And for Martin to capture that performance, number one, and make it sound so good, I just like, now that I'm older, you have more respect. When you're a kid, just like, it sounds great, who cares? You don't know why, but now you have that respect for, like, that's not easy to do.
It was definitely one of the first records where I was like, oh, this production, like I remember like hearing Injustice for All. I went, oh, this production, whether it's good, bad, whatever. Nirvana Bleach was another one where I'm like, whoa, like, the intro of that record with the fuzz bass, and you're like, oh my God, like, what is that sound? And then just being a kid, or Green Day, Dookie was, oh my God, sounded amazing. Things like that when I was young, it was like, those are the records that I noticed. Master of Puppets, obviously, Rust in Peace. It was those, and Killers was in that list of things where I'm like, man, it made me pay attention to Sonics.
Yeah, you mentioned Green Day Dookie. My old friend Rob from Warner Brothers, he was our A&R guy when Metal Blade got to Warner Brothers. And then I remember he was trying to sign Green Day, and he told me after he signed them, because he's like a 21-year-old kid at that point, Rob Cavallo, and he's told me that the only reason Green Day signed with him is because he's the only A&R guy that would smoke pot with him.
Well, I mean, look at what Rob went on to do. I mean, he was right.
Yeah, 100%. But it's just so funny because he was just this young 21-year-old kid. I mean, I was still pretty young too, but he went on to have a pretty decent producing career as well. But back to Maiden and Martin Birch. The other thing that I found really interesting about his career was he wasn't a guy that would produce one or two records with a band. He would do 3, 4, 5, which meant that clearly there was a good relationship. And I'm trying to remember whose book it is, but it might have been Dickinson's book where he was talking about recording with Martin. And Martin was like really kind of funny, and he'd definitely go off the deep end every once in a while and just kind of like get really drunk and crazy and all this sort of stuff. But there was a definite really good chemistry between him and obviously all the bands, because I don't think he ever did like just one record for a band. It was always, Boys Are Called was 3 or 4. Obviously Maiden, it was a whole bunch. Rainbow, he did the Dio stuff, and same thing, he did the Dio stuff with Sabbath as well. So
yeah, I try to do the same thing. I mean, it's quite a bit of bands on Metal Blade I've done the same thing with, and it's something I take pride in that almost more than a lot of other things. Is these relationships that you build. It's a trust thing, and you're there to make decisions for these bands, and obviously Martin was making great ones, and it's clearly the bands trusted him immensely.
Yeah, and that's an art into itself too, because being a producer, as you well know, is not the easiest thing to do, because sometimes you have to tell a band something they don't want to hear, or you have to motivate them. You almost have to have a degree in psychology. Same thing with what I do too, but you almost have to have that degree to be able to, I don't want to say manipulate them, but get them to do what they need to do, but also still remain friends with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a part of the job is the psychology of it, and dealing with things, and just management, relationship management, file management is the name of the gig, man.
I think it's got to be difficult with a band. I mean, obviously these guys are really, really young at this point, Iron Maiden, but clearly this is a next level band of musicians.
Yes.
And it's even harder, I think, to be able to work with that, because you've got a bunch of kids growing up, and they're incredible musicians. You've got to play kind of the father role a bit too.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you definitely have to walk that fine line of not getting too wrapped up emotionally in the relationships, with band members. I mean, because there will be times where you may have to do something you don't want to do, and you have to be able to detach yourself and absolutely just be able to kind of command where you need to, and also not piss anybody off.
Well, he was clearly the master of all of the above, and also the aesthetics. And like you mentioned earlier, that I didn't really think about too much, but when you talk about the drums and the very little use of reverb and that 80s drum sounds that everybody kind of used. Now that I think about it, all that stuff he did in the 80s, the early 80s, even the mid-'80s didn't have that drum sound that kind of everybody was using. He was using a more organic sound, I guess.
Yeah, he absolutely was. I mean, it was drier, but he was I can tell he was very room mic oriented. I would say he kind of had a signature snare sound, but it was also just very open, had a ton of crack. I mean, I wouldn't say he was exaggerated like guys are now. It wasn't like a Bob Rock, Metallica, Motley Crue type of crack, but it was, you listen to Heaven and Hell, or you listen to the Maiden records, and it has that perfect snap. His snares didn't thud; they had to snap.
Yeah, Boys Are Called stuff too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of the 80s that had a thud, and even now, I mean, there's so much low tune snare. I'm like, that snare drum doesn't sound like that. You guys, who are you kidding? And then you hear a Martin Birch record, you're like, that sounds like a fucking drum set, and it sounds like it's being hit hard, and it's just got the energy.
I don't know if I've ever really talked with Lars about this, because all of his favorite records are similar to mine, and obviously a lot of them produced by Martin Birch. I would have loved to have seen him do a Metallica record. I think it just never happened because he was getting older and wasn't really into doing a lot of records like that. But that would have been fascinating to me to have him produce a Metallica record. What that would sound like.
I've thought about that myself. Clearly, that he was on their radar, but yeah, I mean, he just passed away a couple years ago, though, right?
Yeah, he wasn't super old, but I heard that his health had been declining for quite some time, so it's really a shame. I'm trying to remember what band it was, but they played a show in London, and they noticed on the guest list somebody with the last name of Birch, and and I think they had a pass or something, and so they sought this person out afterwards. I got to remember the band. It's going to drive me nuts. And went up and said, hey, do you have any relation to Martin Birch by chance? And she said, yeah, it was my dad. He's like, oh my God. So he kind of talked to her for a while about Martin. And obviously she said he was great as a father and and pretty legendary. And she became a metalhead, obviously, because she was at a metal concert. So that was pretty nice to hear. Any little tidbit I can get about Martin Birch, I'll take.
Fascinating. We should do a dive. We should figure it out.
Yeah.
I would love to get more info.
Well, thank you again for doing this. Lewis, thanks for having us at your studio, and we'll see you next episode probably.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We are coming to you live on tape from the Rock N Pod Expo in lovely Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to welcome in now a man you hear on Sirius XM Radio pretty much every day on a variety of channels, including my favorite one, Boneyard, Mr. Keith Roth. How are you, sir?
Brian, it's great to see you, and I do apologize in advance for all the people that have to listen to me so much because I am so sick of myself at this point. But
well, you've got the radio voice, so you're made for this thing.
I never expected to ever do radio, but it kind of found my way almost 25 years ago. And we had such a good time when you were on the Rock Strap a couple weeks ago.
Yes, I was going to mention your podcast as well. We'll get there.
Brian is quite a sports guy.
Yes, big time. Too much, probably, actually. When you picked this song, I was extremely excited because it was on my list, of course. And I'm very happy to talk about early Iron Maiden. And we're going to do Murders in the Rue Morgue today, which is probably the Di'Anno era, my favorite song that they did.
Really?
Yeah. Why did you pick this one?
Edgar Allan Poe, as a kid, loved the poems. Discovering Iron Maiden, that album cover, Impulse Buy.
Best album cover ever.
Right. A punk rock kid. I put on that record and I was floored. But the one that I always seem to keep rewinding back to was Murders in the Rue Morgue because it reminded me of like an Alice Cooper song. Like, the slow beginning and the crazy bass lines and then that voice, when that voice comes in there and, read the poem and I know there was my mom loved the movie. It was like an older 20s 30s movie.
I think that's where Steve got the inspiration, was more from that than the actual poem itself.
Really?
Yeah. I
just love that Di'Anno era. And, I hear some people, because I know you're a huge Iron Maiden fan. Some people always go back and forth between or they say the first album isn't as good or, to me, they're like both perfect.
I think the problem with the first album, if there is a problem, and Iron Maiden's my favorite band of all time, but just the production. And this one, they got the greatest producer of all time, in my opinion, Martin Birch, to do it. So it sounds amazing. And the first one, the first album they did, and I know reading some of the bios and stuff, that wasn't the best produced album necessarily, but it's still great. I mean, Phantom of the Opera, you can't go wrong there.
I mean, we grew up, right? So we hear things, and it's like the way we heard them is the way they're always going to be remembered. So I don't know. I mean, do you probably have a copy of the first album without Sanctuary on it, right?
Correct.
And then you probably rebought it with Sanctuary, right?
Oh, I probably wrote it 100 times at this point.
Yeah. So you're like me. Like if you go into a store, all right, this is a little bit better than the one I have, so I have to get it. So I mean, well, that's why you're unbelievable because you worked in a record store. As a fan, you've took music and metal to a whole different dimension, and that's the beauty of people that are innovators. It's out of love and it's done from an honest spot, and that's why it resonated in the things that you do. And now have ADHD. So we went from Paul Di'Anno to praising Brian Slagel, but
it's all good.
But we were both talking before about seeing them with Di'Anno, and I saw them, I think 3 times. They played the Palladium in New York City. I was at that show. I'm trying to remember if Asbury Park was before that.
The Palladium was a show I really wish I would have gone to because I saw them open for Priest in Houston.
Right.
Because they weren't originally going to come to the West Coast, and they played with UFO at Long Beach Arena. So I've only seen them in arenas except for the one time they played L'Amour's under some of their synonym name. But that Palladium show, there's bootlegs of it all over the place. It was an amazing show.
Yeah, I have that on. That's what I know. You have millions of them.
I have all of them.
That's the one I have, and I think that some European labels have put it out legitimately. But I remember one thing about that night is you know the band Angel,
of course.
So Danny.
Yeah, of course. I love that. I love Angel. I'm a huge fan.
Well, Danny Aniello was in the back waiting for Iron Maiden to come out, and he told me the story that the pins that Dave Murray was wearing on his leather jacket, some girl was admiring it, because they came out to sign autographs, and he said that Dave Murray gave her the pins, and he was like, but that's on the Made in Japan, or he had some kind of 7-inch single where the pin. And I know it was kind of,
oh wow!
But I know they were always very gracious to their fans.
Yeah, they're good. They're great guys. One thing that you mentioned that I love, and I talked to Mark Lewis about the production end of this thing that you've already heard if you've gotten this far in the podcast. and talk about this a lot with Maiden, especially the early stuff, is the punk influence.
Right.
And Steve Harris has always downplayed that and said he wasn't really into punk, and that didn't really influence what Maiden was doing. They were kind of trying to be anti-punk because they were coming after the Pistols and everything.
Yeah, right.
But I think these first two records, and especially this song, I mean, there's 100% a punk element to this. So I love it when people, especially old school punk rock guys, mention that.
It's because I was a punk kid. I loved the Stranglers, the Sex Pistols, the Ramones. I remember Paul Di'Anno told me when I interviewed him that the first thing he did is Iron Maiden went down to Times Square, maybe to see the current Star Trek movie, and he got in a cab and went to Forest Hills, Queens, because he wanted to see where the Ramones grew up. And he told me that he has a Ramones tattoo, or he has a Ramones tattoo on his back. And we're talking about the Stranglers. And I heard that in the music, and even the covers of Women in Uniform, which was the old Skyhook song. So that to me, that was the band that's like, okay, I love Sabbath. I loved, the Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Cream, and loved punk rock. To me, that was the band that, intertwined both of them.
Well, 100%. And I mean, I was always a fan of metal. I grew up in the 70s, so, Priest and Sabbath, all that stuff. But I was also into other things, and 79, 80 when Iron Maiden was first coming out. I was into, I was in LA, so I was into all the new wave and the punk scene there, and Oingo Boingo and
the Germs.
all this stuff, the Germs, all that amazing stuff. But I've heard the Iron Maiden demo. As everybody knows, I was a big bootlegger as a kid, and a friend of mine sent me an AC/DC live tape from 1978. And he said, "Hey, there's this new band called Iron Maiden. They just put something out called the Soundhats tapes. You might like it," and put it at the end of that show on the tape. And I listened to it, I'm like, oh my God, what is this? That's when metal became my first and foremost thing ever since
That's when the floodgates opened?
That's the floodgates opened massively.
I could see why. And then the whole package, you get me excited. Like the cover, you remember how cool the cover was? And
God,
Eddie?
yes.
He was more badass during the Di'Anno era to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, Killers, we're talking about the Killers album now. I mean, to me, that's still the greatest album cover ever. It's just
I agree.
It's so amazing. And back then, when it came out, that was such a crazy image because you don't see that sort of stuff back then. That was a pretty violent image, which I loved even more.
Impulse buys. You were talking about Priest a second ago. How I discovered Priest is I was at a place called Disco Mat. Do you ever hear of Disco Mat? It was in New York City. It was in there were a small chain of them throughout New York. But I went in to buy the Rush Hemispheres album.
Nice.
And it was around that time, and this guy in the store goes, "You like Rush?" He goes, "I see you buying Rush. You like Sabbath?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I love Sabbath." He goes, "Have you heard Priest?" I'm like, "Well, I heard the name." And he goes, "You got to get this record." And it was Stained Class.
Oh, the best one to get.
And I did buy the Hemispheres, but I thought about this guy, and when I bought that, it was almost like Maiden, that was that. Better by You, Better Than Me, and Beyond the Realms of Death. And I think of that period of heavy metal, those records, the Stained Class, Sin After Sin, Unleashed in the East, the first two Maiden records. To me, that was the glorious period of metal.
100%. And just the whole new wave British heavy metal, that whole scene. That's where I got obsessed with that, obviously after the Maiden thing, and that clearly changed music in so many ways. It's just interesting that there are so many bands in there, and it's like this with any scene. Just a few bands make it out. You look at the thrash scene in the 80s, Slayer, Metallica, Exodus, Anthrax. A few bands made it out, but a lot of bands didn't. But Maiden obviously did make it out. So we were talking earlier, and I wanted to bring this up when we're talking now about Di'Anno and Dickinson. Right. So when Bruce came in after Di'Anno left, and I told you this earlier too, but when Iron Maiden opened for UFO on that I think that was the last show of that US run. I wish I would have saw it. It was great. And of course UFO was amazing too. But I interviewed Paul Di'Anno for my fanzine. My friend John and I interviewed him for the fanzine. He told us, this is before the show too, that he was leaving the band. And we're both I was like...
You thought the band was over?
Yeah, I was devastated. You can't leave? And it's I want to do something more melodic. I think we kind of came out later that he had a little bit of a drinking problem. But by the way, great guy, rest in peace, Paul. But he told us that. I'm like, oh my God. So None of the Beast comes out, and I already love Samson. And I was still working at the record store when that came out. And amongst all of the hardcore metal Maiden fans, it was 50-50. Some people like Bruce, a lot of people I don't like Iron Maiden anymore. I only like the Di'Anno stuff. And it's just funny looking in the rearview mirror now that people were saying that. Now it's Bruce is the legendary guy, but still that Di'Anno stuff is so great though.
With Di'Anno, I hated Samson. I'll be honest. Maybe because a couple people that I'm friends with, a couple in the crew I didn't like too much, and they were big Samson guys. So instantly I'm like, I love Paul Di'Anno. He was like, he was punk rock, everything we were discussing before, and now they got the guy from Samson. So it was one of those nights that there was nothing to do. All my friends were going to see him at the Palladium with the Rods. And I'm like, I'm going to go. I didn't buy Number of the Beast. That's how hard I held out on it. And he blew me away. He was so good. Someone threw a blockbuster or something on stage. He ran out into the crowd. He got all badass. And I'm like, okay. So I bought Number of the Beast probably the next day. And I'm like, all right, this is cool.
You were converted. I was
converted. And then I even bought Head On from Samson, and that started growing on me. I stopped talking to those two guys. And, and then I talked to Bruce when the Mandrake Project came out. We spent like an afternoon together, and it was so cool talking about Hawkwind, because that's another band that I absolutely love. And he was such a Hawkwind guy. I'm like, I'm hearing some elements of Hawkwind, Nick Turner, and the new record. He goes, and he was like so happy. He's like, exactly. He goes, you like Hawkwind? And it's like, and Bruce is a really cool guy.
Oh, Bruce is great. I've been able to hang out with him a few times. Really,
I can see him.
One of the smarter guys. Yeah. Real quick story. I was doing a panel at CMJ back in the day, and I was the moderator. So you have to get there really early. We have to get there like an hour early to discuss the panel, and nobody ever gets there until like 20 minutes before. And especially like the rock stars, like Lemmy was on the panel. He showed up 3 minutes before he started.
Like Don Jameson here at Rock N Pod.
Exactly. But I got there an hour before, and Bruce was already sitting at the table all by himself. I go, what are you doing here so early? And he had just started his solo career. He's like, I want to learn about the music business and how it works, because I'm doing it kind of on my own now. And he was great. We had to talk for a little bit for a while there. But yeah, really, really good dude.
Well, real quick with Bruce, though, what's your favorite Bruce Maiden era record?
Oh, Number of the Beast, greatest record ever.
Mine's Peace of Mind.
Yep.
Number of the Beast, close second. Okay, back to Di'Anno.
Those are the two. Yeah, so Murders, like, it's so fast too. That was the other thing. That was the punk element that I always thought, because it had that. There wasn't a lot of fast songs back then, and it wasn't like a crazy double kick drum. But that song it goes pretty fast, and Di'Anno's got to sing, really those lyrics really that fast. And
I remember it was clear as day. You're right. Yeah.
And I love Bruce, but when Bruce sings it, I think Di'Anno sings that song a lot better, actually.
A lot better.
Yeah, it's just
when that snare roll starts coming in, and then when it picks up, it kind of reminded me of the beginning of Halo of Flies. You remember when that came out? So it's got that build up, right, from Alice. So, and then when Paul comes in there, and it's just that rawness in his voice, and it's like, I've heard Bruce sing it. And it eventually got to the point where they really didn't have to do much Di'Anno stuff, right, except for Iron Maiden.
Yeah, they'll do Phantom of the Opera a bit, which I love that song too. But
so that is your favorite song off of Killers, right?
100%. 100%.
I picked a good one.
Well, it was on my list already, so I go, perfect, I'll check that one off. And the thing about Di'Anno singing so fast too was, I was talking to Blasco. We were talking about Hello 8s. You can go listen to that podcast too. Araya's got to sing those lyrics so fast. That's not easy to do. And I've talked to other singers about that. It's like that's what impresses them almost more than anything. It's just being able to sing those lyrics in that way, that fast.
Yeah. And when I saw him live, I've heard some bootlegs where his voice wasn't, he might have been doing a little bit too much drinking the night before. But every time I saw him, at the Palladium, and he delivered the goods. And I remember him hanging out with the fans in Asbury Park before the show. So that was that whole thing about, his voice, the attitude was a vibe. And, but it was a great period of the band. And I was hoping, to be honest, before Bruce came back, I was even kind of throwing it out there like,
for Di'Anno,
like, Paul's a little bit, this will get him back into fighting shape a lot quicker. He should, let him get his shot back in Iron Maiden.
Yeah, that would have been a lot of fun. Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this.
Oh, Brian,
you picked a phenomenal song. Yeah, we could do this for an hour and a half.
We would skip from so many different things to the next, and next would be it.
Well, we'll get you on again for sure.
I love that, man. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, man. Appreciate
Brian
you.
Slagel, my dude.
Thanks, everyone. Got to thank the great, legendary radio DJ, Keith Roth. Listen to that voice. Like, he has a radio voice. It's almost like that's the only thing he was meant to do on this earth. So, and he does it really well. And he picked a really great song. Thanks again to Mark Lewis. It was really fun seeing him and being in the studio with him to record this. And as always, the great Martin Popoff. Thanks to Lizzie Borden for our theme song. And as always, Christian Blapp, the producer who makes this whole thing happen. We'll see you guys next episode.
100!
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.